You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. It was an incredibly disappointing and deeply unsettling moment for supporters of justice and the rule of law when the Chicago appellate judges announced their decision to uphold the Chicago federal court's ruling sentencing R. Kelly to 20 years in prison. This sentence was not only excessive by any fair legal standard but also significantly above the sentencing guidelines established by law. This decision represented not just a harsh penalty for the accused but a deliberate choice by the court to ignore essential legal protections and constitutional principles designed to prevent precisely this kind of miscarriage of justice. The sentencing guidelines, which exist as a framework to ensure consistency, fairness and proportionality in criminal sentencing, were disregarded. According to these federal guidelines, R. Kelly's sentencing range should have fallen considerably lower than the staggering 20-year sentence that was imposed. Sentencing outside of these guidelines without clear and justified reasoning undermines the integrity of the legal system and creates dangerous precedents where sentences can be driven by public sentiment, emotion, or prejudice rather than the rule of law. Perhaps even more alarming is the appellate court's decision to ignore the clear and binding statutes of limitations that existed during the period in which the alleged crimes were said to have taken place. The statutes of limitations serve a vital role in the justice system, ensuring that legal actions are initiated within a reasonable time frame. This principle recognizes that evidence deteriorates, memories fade, and that the ability to mount a fair defense diminishes over time. By allowing cases to be brought long after these statutory deadlines had expired, the courts essentially negated one of the fundamental protections afforded to every defendant under the United States Constitution. At the time the alleged offenses were said to have occurred, each carried specific statutory timeframes in which charges had to be brought forward. Those timeframes are not arbitrary. They are codified in law to protect both the accuser and the accused, preserving the integrity of evidence and safeguarding the rights of individuals against perpetual vulnerability to prosecution. In R. Kelly's case, those statutes had long expired. This fact was well documented, indisputable, and should have precluded any possibility of these charges being brought to trial, let alone resulting in a conviction and severe sentencing. Nevertheless, the federal court moved ahead, and to the disbelief of legal observers, the appellate judges chose to rubber stamp this clear violation of due process. In doing so, they failed in their duty to act as a check on trial court overreach and government misconduct. An indictment issued in direct violation of expired statutes of limitations is not just a procedural error, it is an illegal act under the law. The fact that such an indictment proceeded to trial, resulting in a conviction and severe sentencing, is an affront to the principles upon which the American legal system is built. The appellate court's role is not to merely accept lower court rulings at face value, but to scrutinize them for such legal errors, constitutional violations and procedural irregularities. In the Chicago case, the most glaring issue being the expiration of the statutes of limitations was evident and should have formed the basis for immediate dismissal or reversal of the conviction. The failure to address this fundamental legal breach reflects a disturbing willingness to prioritize outcome over lawful process. One of the gravest consequences of this appellate decision is the dangerous precedent it sets for future cases. If courts are permitted to ignore statutes of limitations based on the nature of the allegations or the identity of the accused, then no citizen's legal rights are secure. It opens the door for politically motivated prosecutions and selective justice where legal safeguards can be suspended at will to achieve a desired result. This is not the rule of law. It is the rule of emotions, and it is expressly what the framers of the Constitution sought to prevent. Of course, the government used the excuse of an amendment that was made in 2003 which extended the statute of limitations, but this was disqualified by Article 1 Clause 9 of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits retroactive amendments to the existing law. By failing to uphold the statutes of limitations, the court essentially declared that certain individuals can be denied protections guaranteed to all other citizens. This selective application of justice is antithetical to the very concept of equality before the law. If the statutes of limitations can be dismissed for one person, they can be dismissed for anyone, and the principle that the law applies equally to all is eroded. This miscarriage of justice was compounded by the court's imposition of a sentence dramatically higher than the guideline range. The federal sentencing guidelines are not merely suggestions, they are established through years of legislative and judicial refinement to reflect proportionality, fairness and uniformity. When courts deviate significantly from these guidelines without clear and compelling justification, it creates a judicial free-for-all where personal biases and external pressures can dictate sentencing outcomes. The court offered no adequate explanation for such a severe departure from the sentencing norms. Instead, it appeared that the sentence was driven more by a desire to send a public message or to appease certain societal pressures rather than by a fair application of justice based on evidence and legal principle. The appellate court's endorsement of this excessive sentence further entrenched the perception that the legal process in this case was less about justice and more about retribution. It is crucial to understand that the statutes of limitations exist not to protect the guilty, but to ensure that the innocent are not wrongfully prosecuted based on stale, unreliable or non-existent evidence. The expiration of these legal deadlines is a recognition by the law that at some point it becomes impossible to fairly adjudicate a matter. By ignoring this, the courts placed R. Kelly in an impossible position, forced to defend against allegations from decades past without the benefit of contemporaneous evidence, reliable witnesses, or a reasonable opportunity to mount an effective defense. What makes this all the more troubling is that this violation was plain, obvious and well documented in the legal record. Legal experts, defense attorneys and constitutional scholars alike have all recognized the breach of due process. The decision to ignore this fundamental issue suggests a disturbing disregard for the rule of law and the principles of fair trial rights. In the broader context, this case represents a stark warning about the fragility of legal protections when courts allow emotion, public sentiment or political considerations to overshadow the law. The statutes of limitations and sentencing guidelines are not optional suggestions, they are legal mandates. When they are disregarded, it undermines the public's confidence in the justice system and endangers the rights of every citizen. To maintain public trust, the judiciary must remain impartial, bound by law and precedent and not swayed by popular opinion or external pressure. The appellate court's failure to correct the lower court's errors in R. Kelly's case sends a message that legal standards can be selectively applied. This is an unacceptable and dangerous path for any legal system claiming to uphold the rule of law. The constitutional protections afforded to every defendant, including the statutes of limitations, exist to prevent the very type of government overreach and judicial misconduct that occurred here. By ignoring them, the court not only violated R. Kelly's rights but also set a harmful precedent for future cases. This case demands closer scrutiny, legal accountability and ultimately corrective action. Upholding the statutes of limitations is not merely a legal technicality. It is a constitutional imperative vital to ensuring fair trials, due process and equal protection under the law. It is a protection that should never be dismissed, no matter the identity of the accused or the nature of the allegations. The Chicago Appellate Court's decision to uphold the 20-year sentence in the face of these violations is a betrayal of these foundational legal principles. It reveals a court system willing to sacrifice legality for expediency and public favor. This should alarm every citizen who values fairness, justice and the constitutional rights we all depend upon. The upholding of this sentence and conviction despite clear breaches of legal standards serves as a troubling indictment of the current state of the justice system. It is a moment that demands reflection, reform and a recommitment to the rule of law. The statutes of limitations exist for a reason, sentencing guidelines exist for a reason, and the appellate courts exist to correct the very type of errors that have so grievously undermined justice in this case. Until these issues are addressed, therefore, the integrity of the legal system remains at risk and the rights of all citizens hang in the balance. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.